and I'd like to thank you for joining us for our session, Empowering Instructional Design with Custom GPTs. And I'm going to let Dr. Megan VanBuskirk take it away.
All right, thank you, everyone. So there's been a lot of noise about generative AI today. So feel free to share in the chat your experience level with AI, if it's something that you've been using a lot, something you've been a little bit fearful of, how you're using it either as an instructor, an instructional designer, or an administrator. I'd love to hear from all of you. So we'll get started. For those of you who have not attended one of my sessions before, my name is Megan VanBuskirk. I am currently serving as the professional development lead of the IDA. I'm also working over at Excelsior University as the director of quality assurance. And because I like having so many things to do, I am also wrapping up my doctoral studies right now at Johns Hopkins University in higher education leadership with a minor in instructional design. So some of my research interests over the last couple of years have centered on creating custom instructional design templates that cross quality matters standards with holistic learner wellness. And also just this past year, I've been getting really into doing some custom GPTs. So I hope that this is something that is actionable for you to take away with today, and it's something that we'll be able to play around with today for those of you who have access. So for our session today, the objectives are we are going to develop some crisp, measurable learning objectives, utilizing custom GPT and how that elevates the learning journey. We're gonna showcase that. We're also going to look at how to create some really compelling assessment ideas and lesson plans that are aligned to those assessment plans using custom GPTs, and then also evaluate curriculum alignment, right? That's a really hot topic right now with generative AI in higher education and in instructional design, is ensuring alignment. So those are a few of the main things that we're going to be doing today. So the first thing that I want to talk about, and you'll notice there is a link on screen, and I believe our lovely session host is going to pop this link in the chat for everyone to try the Academic Navigator. So this is a custom GPT that I have built, and I just want to talk for a few minutes about why I believe it's so important to build your own AI brain, right? So when you build your own AI brain, you're going to get the most customized knowledge. So for instance, those of you who might be following to the Academic Navigator, just please note you do need a premium GPT-4 account to test that out. It will not work if you have a GPT 3.5 account, unfortunately. But the brain behind that custom GPT, a lot of work went into building that source of truth, if you will. And so the first thing that I did to get this brain built is I wanted to ensure that it really encapsulated the identity of my institution. So I created a large Word document. The first thing I did was ensure that the mission, vision, values, and credo of Excelsior University were at the forefront of this brain that I was building. I also wanted to go in at a more granular level and look at our strategic goals over the next 3 years at our institution. Some of those areas were excellence in instructional design and online course development. A big initiative at Excelsior right now is JEDI across the curriculum. So justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion across the curriculum, across all of our different departments and everything we do at Excelsior. So I wanted to ensure that these strategic goals were also at the forefront of this brain that I had crafted. So that was my baseline, pulling together all of the things that I felt made a good institutional identity to be a part of this brain. And then the quality infrastructure that I had built for our department was the other key piece to building this brain. So we identified our course design principles that we felt were most important to have a quality course at Excelsior. Of course, Quality Matters 7th edition workbook was a huge piece of that. Other pieces of that looked like additional standards with WCAG 2.2 and Universal Design for Learning principles, We currently have Middle States as our accreditor, so additional guiding principles in alignment with Middle States were a part of the brain as well. Also, experiential learning theory extended to some of David Kolb's principles on experiential learning theory. And then our justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion principles. My team crafted a rubric for that as well. And then holistic learner health and wellness. So all of these things, all of these quality criteria made up the quality identity of our courses, if you will. So I then had the identity of the institution and the identity of the courses. And then I had my brain built. And by building your own brain, there's a lot better chance of quality assurance with your custom GPT because there's capabilities where you can turn off web browsing, you can turn off image generation, and you can choose those features on the back end. And so with this academic navigator, what you'll find for those of you who have the opportunity to test it out is that it's not going to be pulling information off the web. That's not going to happen. It's going to be only the custom information that I have asked it to pull from its knowledge source, which is going to be the identity of Excelsior University and also those quality criteria, that infrastructure I've built with my team. So it's definitely helpful for quality assurance. So I would highly recommend anyone going in to build custom GPTs for these instructional design best practices. I highly recommend you take the time to build your own source of truth. And it also helps with proactive alignment, right? So even if I don't want to do a specific instructional design task or something with curriculum creation or alignment, it's something where I can put a report together, and every time I can just get that connection to our key performance indicators, our strategic goals, and ensure that the work that I'm doing, the work that my team's doing, is going to be aligned back to what we're all working towards as an institution. So again, just a really huge piece of building a solid custom brain for your GPT. So on screen, you can see a demo here that's going to play. I think all of you who've been playing around with OpenAI and GPT knows that sometimes it crashes, sometimes it doesn't work when you want it to. So I didn't want to take that chance with all of you, but on screen, you'll see that if you do have the custom GPT-4 account, you are able to go to that Explore GPTs option and select that create button to start creating your own custom GPT. And when you do that, there's a couple of options and you'll see a create and configure button with that demo that's going to pop up after you click to create your own GPT. And there's different things to name your GPT and offer some conversation starters. But you'll see there's a knowledge source there, and that's where I've uploaded my source of truth. So after pulling that institutional identity and that course design quality identity into that knowledge source, then I can select some different features. So you'll see the capabilities for web browsing, for image generation, and code interpretation. So for myself, I wanted to ensure this is something that was only pulling off my source of truth, my knowledge base, and therefore I did uncheck those capabilities. So that's a really good start to getting your knowledge base ready for your custom GPT. So when talking about how to start making a difference in instructional design and curriculum development, the first thing you're going to want to look at right away is creating specific prompts. So I know that at a previous session, we had Rob Gibson share an amazing prompt book. We also had Heather Bratz share a really nice resource she had on creating prompts. This is really important. This is why this is a good first step for instructional designers and online education administrators, because it matters, right? If you want the results to be worthwhile and efficient, then you need to ensure that you're setting your GPT up for success. So when you're asking for a specific output, you need to be very direct with what you're looking for, provide context. So for example, if I'm asking my GPT to create some objectives, I need to explain the context. This is for an undergraduate course, or this is for a graduate course, or this is for a module level set of learning outcomes, not a course level. What is the desired format? Do I want this to be represented in a bulleted list, a numbered list, a narrative? Do I want it to be put into a table? Those specifics are very important as well. Also the complexity level. So what I mean by complexity level, that can mean several different things. For me, in the context of learning objectives, I'm going to need to tell my custom GPT what I want it to do in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. So do I want it to generate at the remember level, the apply level, the evaluate level? I need to be very explicit about that. Also the purpose or goal. That's a great way to start out your prompt. The goal of this output is to do blank. So the goal of this output is to create module learning objectives for, and then provide details on the context and the level. Also giving some specific examples. So you could pull a previous example that you have. I think this is a great learning objective. Please try to model the simplicity and the explicitness of this objective. Also, citation needs at times can be helpful, but again, I know that anyone who's played around with GPT knows that that's probably one of AI's worst skills is generating false citations from research articles that don't exist. So if you happen to be doing a task where it requires a citation, one good thing is just to request, please put in a placeholder for a citation here. So that way you have the place for it, but you can go back and manually add that and do your quality checking. Also creative requests. So if you're doing something specific with graphics for a course, another GPT that I have that I'm not showing today actually does some accessibility tasks. And one of those is to create images that are in the size of a Canvas LMS banner, and also that meet specific ratios of color contrast. So be very clear what you want that to look like. This is the size, the color, the style I want this to look. Any historical or cultural context is also really important for generating lessons and assessment ideas. And then you can also limit or exclude information that you explicitly do not want. So I would like you to create a list of module learning outcomes, but please exclude any objectives that would be at that understand or remember level. So in action, you can see in this demo using the academic navigator, I've started with a prompt. My goal is to create learning objectives at the course level, and they are foundational graduate course in computer science, so that I'm giving some context for a specific prompt. I want them in a bulleted list so that I'm providing information on the format. And I'm also asking for the verb to come first. That's my preference. So that's how I would like it to look. I also want to start at the apply level of Bloom's, and I want learners to apply coding concepts in Sketch so that I'm giving a really clear subject in the prompt as well. So those are the types of prompts that you want to think about to start, building a good quality foundation from the start. Because if you start with these good specific prompts, then you can build your outcomes and all of your other contents into related aligned content. So talking about generating measurable learning objectives, this is something that I had to play around with quite a bit with my GPT. And one of the things that I also put in my source of truth for building this brain in this GPT, and to ensure that I was getting the deliverables that I wanted for the purposes of my practice. So one of the things I made very clear is that I don't want you to just follow any certain standards for any of these areas that I'm measuring for my department. I also want to be very granular about what that looks like for me. So for me, what is a measurable learning objective? So for me, that starts with singularity. I want to see singularity in Bloom's taxonomy. I really don't want to see dual taxonomy if possible, because I think a lot of us often see outcomes where learners are asked to identify and evaluate, for example, and maybe they can identify something but not evaluate it. So then you've conflated taxonomy together, and it's actually not going to give an accurate representation through the assessment of if that outcome was met. So I'm very clear about that, avoiding multiplicity and sticking to that singularity. Also ensuring that there's explicit objectivity instead of abstract subjectivity. So the first taxonomy verb I think of that I've seen over and over again throughout the years is appreciate. So I think people who tend to be in, more narrative writing courses or art courses think, oh, this would be such a beautiful objective. I'm going to ask learners to show their appreciation. But as we all know, that's very abstract. It's difficult to measure appreciation from one person to another. And also how I would measure for that is going to be different than how somebody else might measure for that. So I also want my outcomes to be explicit. I want them to be objective. And then I want them to have a learner-centric subject. So I don't want a learning outcome to be at the point where the subject is really vague and there's a lot deeper to dive. So we want to make sure there's enough meat on the bone, so to speak. But also, I don't want the opposite either. I don't want it to be, a really long sentence separated by commas with a lot of jargon that learners aren't going to really understand until they get into the rest of the learning materials. So those are the three things that are going to be the most important for me in creating measurable learning outcomes. Make sure there's singularity, there is objectivity, and there is a learner-centric subject. So in looking for this, I can also just be very specific in my prompt for that request. So write a list of 5 module learning objectives and then I'm going to give more details for that level of learning. For an undergraduate art history course, I chose that course at random. I have very little art history knowledge, I promise. Ensure that only singular taxonomy is used for each objective, along with simple and explicit language and student-centric subject. So I'm able to give it, that clarity, and I want it to focus on impressionist art. I also want it to scaffold. So my request here was, please scaffold from the remember domain to the apply and evaluate domain. So you can see it's quickly generating here a nice objective list for me. So identify key impressionist artists and describe their major works. Oh, see, I would give it feedback there. So for everyone who's saying that AI isn't perfect, you're absolutely right. You always want to check it. So that's a piece of feedback that I would give it, is that you use describe and identify. Just because you bolded the first one didn't mean there was only one. But there are some nice, simple objectives that have been created here. And that's something that if I don't like the way they look, then I can use this as a nice foundation and adjust it, because we're not using generative AI just so it can simply do the work for us. It's almost a partner to help us brainstorm at times, right? And knowing that this is coming from my own knowledge base is a little bit of a comfort, right? These requests. So moving forward, after you have some good objectives ready to go, there's a couple of different directions you can go to build off of this. So I know that different educators, different instructional designers like to build differently. Personally, my preference is to start lesson planning and consider the assessment plan as part of each of my lesson plans. But I know that others prefer doing the opposite. So that's actually the way that I'm presenting it for this presentation. I know that some individuals really like to start with the grading weights and building a robust assessment plan on the back end, and then fleshing out those lesson plans. So here, the next thing I would do, and again, I could do either or, lesson planning or assessment planning. I'm going to start with assessment planning based off that foundation of those outcomes that I've generated, either from a faculty standpoint or from an instructional designer standpoint. I know many of us run off different models with different roles and responsibilities between the SMEs and faculty and instructional designers. So whatever role I was in, that's how I would start. And of course, always ensuring alignment to the MLOs and the CLOs. Think of our General Standard 2 in the QM workbook. That just has to be the foundation of everything, right? We also want to ensure that when we build out a lesson assessment plan, that it's going to have cohesion with any previous lesson planning that we have done. And we want to ensure it meets the appropriate targets, right? So if we build out a robust assessment plan, it needs to measure what we're suggesting that it's going to measure. So then in this demo, I'm going to build off of the different scaffolding objectives that I've requested previously. And I'm going to, again, use a very specific prompt to build off of that and say, create a simple assessment plan for one module that considers the previous MLOs. And I've given it some information here. So the subject is undergraduate art history. I would like it to develop module 6 of 8. Subtopic is impressionist art. And I've given some resources for a sample. So again, it went to work very quickly about getting together an assessment plan for Module 6, Impressionist Art. There's some really good variety here for an art creation project with some really nice details and even submission format. Then following the art creation project, a critical review essay, and then finally ending with some peer feedback session. So what's really nice about this is not only is this aligned with my previous outcomes, it's also really been very diverse about the assessment plan. So first, learners are tasked with creating an art project, then they're asked to do some critical thinking, and then they're asked to collaborate with their peers. So that's actually a really nice balance and something that I would be mindful of looking for both as a faculty and an instructional designer. Is this nice and balanced? Is this providing equity, and is it following UDL principles? So it's also given a really nice overall assessment strategy. Some different things that you can do based on your output is, of course, talk to your GPT, right? So if this is too robust for one module, then explain that. Say this is a great plan, but it seems a little bit heavy for one module, especially for undergraduate students. Could you please parse this down to something a little bit more simple? Or you could actually go in the opposite direction. You could say, I really like this project and I would like it to go across an 8-module course. And I would like to do some benchmarking each week for different types of art, going from Impressionist art to Expressionism to Cubism. And you could give it that prompt and have it adjust your assessment plan there. So yeah, it's a great way to build off of your solid outcomes and start with that assessment plan. And another, logical next step after you have an assessment plan is, what does it look like to construct rubrics for that assessment plan? We now have a framework and some ideas for how we want to assess learners across the course, but how are we actually going to assess those specific artifacts? And so the things that you're going to want to think of when you're constructing those rubrics is the information that you're going to need in the rubric, in a traditional rubric. So think of the target. What is the actual assignment or artifact that I want to measure the mastery of? Also thinking of the levels. Do I want there to be 3 levels of mastery, 4 levels of mastery, or 5 levels of mastery? And also considering the value. So how many points do I want each of these levels to be worth? Do I want it to start at 0 points, or do I want it to start at 5 points for the lowest mastery level? And how do I want that to increase in terms of increments? And then finally, considering the criteria of your actual rubric. So it's great that you know what you want to measure and you know how many levels of mastery there can be and for what value, but the most important part is, of course, the criteria. So for this particular assignment, what are you looking for? Are you measuring creativity? Are you measuring connections to course concepts from the lesson? Are you measuring collaboration between peers? Are you looking for APA format? So outlining what those criteria are. And if you have these 4 things, it generates a very robust rubric that can be built upon that assessment plan, which was built upon those learning outcomes. So in the next demo on screen, you will see that we're continuing in the exact same chat for the academic navigator. So I'm requesting to build upon this using the former assessment plan details. Let's create an art creation project rubric for the module. So I'm going to take the first assessment idea it had in that plan, and I'm going to ask it to use 4 levels of mastery, offer 5 to 20 points in increments for the levels, and the criteria measured from lowest mastery to the highest mastery should be creativity, application of content knowledge, formatting, clarity, and comprehensiveness. So then I have my exact criteria. And once again, it pedals away pretty quickly. And without even asking for a specific format, I think maybe because I said rubric, it just knew I'm going to put this in a table for you, which I very much appreciate. And then after the rubric, there's even some scoring guidelines that it's summarized for me. So it gave me a clear plan. And that's something that you can pull out of a table if you'd like. I've seen a couple of faculty members and instructional designers before who've done rubrics outside of a table, but it should get your format in line. And then you have a rubric ready to go along with that assessment plan that you've created. So whether you're a faculty member who's getting this curriculum ready for an instructional designer to build out in Canvas, or whether you're an instructional designer who has a little bit more autonomy to support that assessment plan, either party can go in and start with this method and start with those outcomes and that root foundational alignment to build out an assessment plan in these rubrics. And it really helps support the process and allows you to have a really nice consultant along the way. So then what is the next step after this? As I mentioned before, you can start with the lesson plans and go on to the assessment plans and rubrics, or you can start with the assessment plan and rubrics and you can go on to creating aligned lesson plans. So once again, can't say this enough to all the QMers out there, you've got to ensure alignment with the MLOs and the CLOs. That's the point of starting with them. And you want to ensure cohesion with other topics. So if your assessment plan has outlined some specific topics, you need to ensure there's cohesion with that. Alternatively, if you have lesson plans created already and you're looking for an assessment plan, you again need cohesion with those topics. So just think of all of our alignment standards in the QM workbook. And also you want to ensure there's consistency with targets, especially if you're doing the assessment plan and the rubrics first. So how can I ensure that there's consistency with targets? As we know, sometimes generative AI says, hey, I'm being extra helpful. Here's this extra information and it's great. But you say, oh, I already have outcomes. So please use these ones instead. So ensure that there's consistency with those targets and ultimately the domain of which you're asking learners to accomplish. So moving forward with that lesson plan, this can be a really great way to brainstorm some framework for your lesson plans. And I'm going to ask the academic navigator, keeping in alignment with former course and module learning outcomes and staying on track with other topics, remaining consistent with the targets that are at the evaluate or create domain of Bloom's. I'm going to ask it to then create a lesson plan for module 7 on cubism and a lesson plan for module 8 on expressionism. So we can build off that prior module 6. And I'm going to ask it for some specific items. I want overview information, I want resource ideas, and I want a framework for some of those activities. So again, pedals away very quickly, and it gives me a nice module overview for cubism along with some resource ideas, again, which are very diversified, and some activity ideas that are also very diversified, and an evaluation plan for both modules. Now, I would absolutely want to go through and make some adjustments to this. The first thing that I noticed is that it generated some module learning outcomes for me, and I probably already have module learning outcomes, right? So I would probably say, this looks great, but could you please use the former module learning outcomes? And those of you who've been playing around pretty frequently with GPT have probably seen that OpenAI now has the ability to capture memory from previous chats and across chats. So this should be a lot easier now. So instead of saying, actually, these are my module learning outcomes and copying and pasting them again and saying, could you use these ones instead to align, it can then go back to former conversations or further up in that conversation to pull those module learning outcomes. So one of my favorite things to talk about is infusing curriculum with your course tenets. So earlier I was talking about those course design principles that you have as an institution. So you have your institutional identity, and then you have your best practices, often as a whole institution, or maybe just as an instructional design online education department. You have those things that you believe are important. So many of us are using Quality Matters, some of us are using the OLC scorecard, but there's so many things outside of that that we place importance on, again, like our accreditors and additional accessibility initiatives, or DEI efforts, holistic learner health and wellness. So what's important is to, again, I emphasize the institutionally trained brain to help you infuse your curriculum. And I actually think this is one of the best uses for custom GPTs. This is one of the reasons I've been so excited to start building off some foundations in custom GPTs, because it allows you to so seamlessly infuse your curriculum. I've met with a lot of associate deans and program chairs in the last several months, and they've told me, Megan, I would love to make my course more in line with cultural and historical significance. And I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I just don't know how to do it. And I've said, don't worry, I've got ideas for how we can do that. Or they've said, you know, I really want to prioritize learners as more than academics. I really would like to support them more holistically. When I think of these other domains of health and wellness, I'm just not sure how to incorporate that in my course. I have a computer science program. I don't want to randomly tell learners to jog or eat something healthy. I don't want to tell them to take a mental health break and focus on their emotions. How can I incorporate that? And this is one of the great ways that we can make that happen is because we've built an institutionally trained brain on the back end. We have a rubric with solid ideas for what that looks like already, right? So we're able to just generate that and use it as a consultant or a brainstormer for SMEs who are having trouble doing that. So starting with, again, customized module learning outcomes or course learning outcomes, I can meet with these associate deans and program chairs and I can say, hey, if you want to, we can even take a look at your curriculum map and see how we can infuse that with some different course design principles for your accreditation applications. And so then we're able to even upload a spreadsheet or a map and say, how can we just make this more committed to cultural competency? And it'll generate some ideas. And then we can use those brainstormed ideas to at the very top of the curriculum map and to the accreditation applications. We can ensure that our content, yes, is culturally competent, that it's very aligned to Jedi principles. That's just one example of how we've been able to do this very early on in the infrastructure. And then down towards the course map, you can start there if that's the most you can do because you can't change your curriculum map and you don't have buy-in to, then you can start at the course level if you have that autonomy. So, let's start with customized module learning outcomes that follow one of those tenets. I had someone the other day say, I really want to incorporate more health and wellness in my business course. And so then I'm able to take her objectives and I'm able to ask the custom GPT, can you ensure that this discipline area seamlessly aligns to a focus on health and wellness using your knowledge base of the health and wellness rubric? And it was easily able to, of course, prattle that off in a matter of seconds. And when you have, again, that good foundation, then you can infuse that at the other levels as well as we've been doing on screen today. So you can then elevate your lesson plans, you can diversify your resources, you can enrich your assessments, and you can even adjust some tools and technologies based off of those different tenets and those standards that you've created ahead of time. So again, cannot emphasize enough the importance of a custom brain that you have built that infuses that identity of quality and your institution as well to meet your strategic goals. So here on screen, I'm going to use an example of doing just that. So I'm going to ask my GPT, using your knowledge of Excelsior's strategic goals and health and wellness rubric, adjust the module learning objectives for Module 6 to include more wellness staples, diversify resources and assessments based on the JEDI rubric, and offer tool and technology ideas that align with the accessibility and experiential rubric. Be sure to explain the alignment between these factors. And that is a tall order. That is a huge ask, but it's not a big ask because I've built the brain so that it can do that. So it can accomplish this. So right away, it's revising my outcomes. It's showing the alignment to JEDI. It's showing the alignment to my institution's strategic goals. My boss will love that, by the way. And then I'm able to see some more alignment throughout the diversified resources, adjusting those assessments and tools and technologies. And you'll see it's actually also brought up some information about that accessibility rubric and has some really great information about accessibility features and calling out collaboration tools because it already has knowledge of that assessment plan where peers are collaborating with one another. So the recommendation to ensure that tools like Google Workspace or Teams have diverse learning style and needs met is a really good and relevant suggestion based on the brain that I've created for it. So there's a lot of amazing things that you can do if you set that criteria on the back end and appropriately set up your custom GPT. So I think maybe one of the moments you've all been waiting for, I think everyone gets really excited about actual alignment checking, which again, if you build in the way that we've built today and you're responsible and accountable for those outputs, I think that a lot of the alignment checking is really done for you, right? But let's think of a course that's already been built and you want to go in and do an alignment audit to see if maybe you need to form a curriculum committee to improve some of the curriculum and ensure that it's aligned. Maybe you need to do a new accreditation application higher up at the institution. That's absolutely something that you can do again with this academic navigator. And I know that not all of you are going to have the premium GPT-4. That said, some of the things that you're seeing today, you can absolutely do this with GPT 3.5. I just don't recommend it since it's pulling so many sources off the web and you have a lot less control over that consultation model and really need to be much more accountable because you're vetting information from the World Wide Web, right? So if you build your own brain, there's a lot less to cross check. But with alignment checking, there's a lot of different things that we can check for, both in GPT 3.5 and GPT-4, or custom GPTs. So I mentioned earlier curriculum maps. That's something you can absolutely check for. GPT-4 has that capability to upload documents. So you can upload a Word document, an Excel file, and plug your curriculum map right in and ask for specific feedback on alignment. And again, be sure to use that specific prompt. What kinds of alignment do you want to look for? You can also do that with a course map in a Word or Excel, any type of document, even a PDF or an image with GPT-4 or your custom GPT will be able to check for alignment. And some institutions, maybe there isn't a curriculum map, maybe there isn't a course map, but I think we've also all seen some ideas of outcome charts with rows and columns, or maybe there's just some parenthetical citations or a numbering system in the syllabus or another specific outcomes page in the course. And you can actually copy and paste that to get some effective results as well. So I want to showcase a little bit of that. Here you can see I'm actually copying and pasting directly from Canvas, some bullet formats as well as some outcomes. And I'm able to take that information over to the GPT and say, check the following course alignment up to the program and down to the module, offering key strengths, misalignment relationships, and suggestions for improvement based on the Quality Matters workbook standards. And I'm able to plug that in and watch it go away. So it's going to talk about the key strengths of the outcomes tied to specific broad course goals. There's diverse assessment methods, good resource integration, but then it does call out some misalignment relationships. It calls out some the depth of cognitive engagement, and it talks about some suggestions for improvement. So I know that there's a lot of individuals who are thinking, gosh, I couldn't trust this to do my alignment checking for me. And you're right, you can't fully trust a GPT to do your alignment checking for you. You absolutely can't. But I will say that I have done my manual Quality Matters reviews with my team, as well as looking for other standards such as JEDI across the course, accessibility items. And we've done very thorough reports that have taken us many, many hours, and we have compared them to the outputs, and they're very, very close, which was honestly very surprising to me. I would call out a misplaced parenthetical citation from an MLO to a CLO, or just notice that maybe there was a set of MLOs that were connected to CLOs that were at a higher domain than the CLO, and there was a misalignment relationship and they weren't consistent with one another. And I thought, oh, there's no way that my custom GPT is going to figure this out. And so I said, please look to ensure that there is consistency from the module to the course level, and that there are no module objectives that are connected to course objectives that are at a higher domain than the course. And it called it out. It called it out right away. It called out every single one, and I was very impressed. But again, you've got to look, you've got to cross check, and again, be responsible with your usage. So then this is a great segue talking about providing GPT feedback. So when you provide your GPT feedback, you need to ensure that you're very specific. You need to suggest alternatives. Don't be shy. I am very specific to my GPT. Just know I'm very thankful of it too. I'll say please and thank you to my GPT. But I will also say this is a little disappointing. I would prefer it if you did it this way. And also explaining some of those errors. You want to be very clear about explaining what went wrong. Emphasizing tone and highlighting strengths is very important, and engaging regularly, right? So you don't want to just allow your GPT to continue to make the same error. You want to ensure that you say, actually, I don't like it. Could we do this way? And allow it to adjust accordingly. So for instance, based off of this information that we've been working on in this same chat, I'm going to be clear and say, I do not like the suggestions for experiential learning, as this is not an alignment need for this course. For example, leveraging technologies for additional experiential learning. So then I'm able to pull a specific example that it generated and say, actually, this really isn't for me, or it's not for the correct context. And I'm asking it, I would prefer to focus more on health and wellness criteria and outcome measurability. Also, tone and style are excellent and in a good format, but be sure to watch out for errors when checking for misalignment with Bloom's domains. And what can you do to adjust? So the very funny thing about this GPT is not only has it reimagined its response for me, it's also thought of suggestions for improvement for other people at my institution, which I find hilarious. So you'll see there's train educators under bullet point number 3 for accurate application of Bloom's taxonomy, which is actually kind of clever, right? So I'm not the sole one responsible for Bloom's taxonomy. You also need to take the time to train your educators. And it's not wrong. It's really not. But again, you want to vet that and ensure that context is actually helpful for you, because maybe it's not helpful for you. So again, going back through and ensuring that that is relevant feedback that you're generating. So then in addition to this, we have accountability as consultants, right? So GPT is not to replace our brain. It's absolutely not to replace our brain. Even if we build the brain, we can't just say, that's always my brain, because it's not. It's going to interface with information that you feed it that is somebody else's. When I copied and pasted that outcome relationship, that wasn't mine. And even though I built the brain, I have to see, is it processing the information in the same way I would as an expert? And sometimes that's not the case. So we do need to verify accuracy and reliability also. I won't say this doesn't make my job a lot easier. I think it makes my job a lot easier, but I do have to then put more effort into accuracy and reliability. Those things are very important. And also just context. It might say something that's great, but it's just not relevant for that particular context. And also ensuring ethical use. We can't go ahead and use these tools in our workplaces, in our education, if we're against any ethical use policies, which are so different from institution to institution, right? So we also want to be very careful with that. And for continuous improvements, in addition to offering that frequent feedback and being accountable as the user, we also want to do frequent testing and validation. We want to update those features on the back end. So just recently I decided, I don't want you to source the internet, but you can go ahead and generate images. So adjusting those features on the back end is helpful. And doing regular brain updates. My brain is not going to be relevant forever. I know our strategic goals are going to change in a couple of years. Some of our values as an institution could change. Our quality rubrics could change. So I want to make sure that my brain is frequently updated as well. And peer feedback is great. So for those of you who've been able to play around with the Academic Navigator today and follow along and test some things out, I'd love your feedback. If you can't play around with it until after the session today, I would still love your feedback, and please send it my way. And I know we just have a few minutes left, but I just want to take this time for questions or just for any quick demo anyone might want to see to get started on this. Feel free to unmute or type in the chat. And I know that our lovely session host is also going to help out and paste this companion guide into the chat for all of you that gives information about generating those specific prompts, so that you can take the Academic Navigator link if you have that premium account, as well as these prompts from the companion guide, and give it a shot. And again, just a plug for Rob Gibson and Heather Bratz, who've also shared some really amazing resources today. And those could be tested out both in the Academic Navigator or in some other custom GPTs. So thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Megan. And there are a couple of questions in the chat if you want to go back through that, or if you'd like me to kind of go through and pick them out and read them, just let me know.
Could you go through, Barbara? That would be great.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the very beginning to make sure that I catch them all. Let's see. Okay, so there was one question from Gina pretty early on asking how you provide feedback to the GPT when you don't like the response of the prompt. I think you shared some great information about that it's really a conversation, and you go back based on that answer that you got to kind of modify what you're looking for and what it has given you. Let's see, what other questions? Someone, Roxana asks, have you had a chance to use Canva for banners?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I've used this to generate banners that are in the size of Canva, in the size of Canvas. And if you're asking about the actual generative AI in Canva, it's fabulous as well. And in fact, I should say, fun fact with this presentation, I actually generated all the images myself through Canva AI, which took an obnoxious amount of time, but I was super committed to a specific aesthetic. So thank you for that question.
Okay, Joshua has a question. Does your institution have a partnership with OpenAI to have a sandbox to protect data that you use or submit to your GPT?
We
So
do, yeah, we do not. There is a specific note on that on the back end when you create the custom GPT about privacy to ensure that, because I know that is a concern for everyone. But there is privacy information on the back end that you can look into when you create that custom GPT.
okay, and here's kind of a big question from Bo that may need to be more so him writing to you about it, but he's asking, can you share more about how you build your knowledge base in the custom GPT? And
Yes,
says, yeah,
please email. I'm happy to have that conversation.
okay. Yeah, I had a feeling about that. Let's see if there's anything else just really quick. Um, Tara says she's excited about all of this, but a little overwhelmed. Do you pay for your premium version or does the institution pay for it?
I'm currently paying for my own version. I do have it budgeted for my entire team, but we don't find out until June what our budget requests are. But it's just too valuable for me, so I pay for it for myself right now, and it's $20 to $25 a month depending on your subscription.
Okay, thank you. And I have one quick question. Um, myself, if you have a sense of how many institutions are doing similar things to this, I really don't know, and I'm curious about that.
I actually don't know a lot of institutions that are, but I am in contact with a couple of colleagues that are actually here at the session today. And we've been tracking our progress at our institutions to see what amazing things we can cook up for future presentations with QM. And on the docket for me next, I would love to create a custom GPT for each of our specific review standards for QM to streamline reviews for our reviewers.
Wow. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much. It's been a whirlwind and a lot of excellent information. I'm glad that we were able to at least post a couple of links in the chat and that resources link that I posted at the end. And so I'm going to say thank you so much and I'm going to stop the recording and ask that everybody have a great rest of your day.
And also the feedback survey as well, Barbara.
Yes, that's very true. I'm not sure if I posted at the very beginning, but if you go through the attendee hub, there's a very brief survey asking for feedback for this session. Same thing for all the other sessions you attend. It would be really helpful. And separately from that, there is an evaluation for the entire conference that would be helpful to us as well. So thank you for reminding me on that, Megan.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.